Present information to us today on the recent released Australian Horticulture Sustainability Framework and benefits of grape production. The framework is a guide to help the horticultural sector share its sustainability, ethical and farm-safe practice stories through stakeholders. Thank you.
All right, g'day everyone, thanks for having me on today. As Mark mentioned, I'll be giving you a run through of our newly launched sustainability framework for horticulture. So we're pretty excited to see this come together and see maybe where dried grapes fit into the future. So 5 sort of key areas. I just wanted to start off, the questions come about Hort Innovation and things like that. So I'll just give you a bit of background in terms of what we do. Some of you guys probably already have a fair idea, but it's always worthwhile just covering that off quickly. And then I'll take you through sort of the steps we sort of took to get this framework together, the process that was involved. And then we'll just jump inside the framework and I'll take you through sort of the key pillars that we came up with, the topics, the document indicators, and where the relevance might lie for dried grapes. And then that'll fit into using the framework, and then the future in terms of where we want to get to around sustainability reporting. So that's really where we want to get to, sort of moving through. So who are Hort? So this one just is a quick visual. We sort of have two investment mechanisms. So Hort Innovation is the research and development corporation. We're one of 15, so there's 15 of these across all the different agri sectors, and we invest grower levies into research, development and marketing. And there's effectively two mechanisms that we work to do that at Hort Innovation. We have the levy investment, which is more of a short-term in the here and now focus. And then we also have a frontiers investment, which is focused on what are the whole of horticulture challenges that have more of a blue sky delivery mechanism. So things like pollination, things like advanced production systems, leadership and things like that. So we're quite unique. We are the RDC, but there's 34 individual commodities that we service. So dried grapes are one of those, but we have 33 other commodities. So horticulture, obviously is very diverse. So we do service a lot of different industries, and some of those, there is some overlap in some of the areas. But ultimately, what we seek to deliver against is looking at ways to support productivity, demand, capability, and also business insights. So having the growers and industry, more informed around what makes good business and how they can leverage that information. And how we do this is through we launched these in October last year. So these strategic investment plans. So this is like a 5-year plan. We've got one for dried grapes. There's the other dried industries up there as well. And this really is the document that guides the investment that we deliver for all of the relevant industries. And in terms of other numbers, for the last financial year, in terms of R&D, which is probably most relevant for this group, from a levy perspective, this is across the board, $47.9 million that we committed to through the levy investment across just over 450 individual R&D projects. So there's a lot going on, when we take a wide net. But in terms of what that means for dried grapes, I mentioned that we've got this strategic investment plan. I've just thrown up some content here in terms of the industry at a glance, and you can check all this out online if you're interested. It's often good to have that background knowledge. But we valued the industry in 2019-20 just a tick over $29 million production value for dried grapes, and as you can see, around 40% of that volume is exported. So it's obviously a very important market for dried grapes. But taking a quick look in this actual strategic investment plan, I mentioned before there's those 4 areas. So supply, productivity and sustainability, extension and capability, so making sure that we're actually aware and informed and can actually take on board all of the R&D that we've got. Business insights in terms of keeping us informed on not only supply but also the consumer. What are consumers looking for, and how can we make sure our product best fits that need? And finally, trying to look for ways to boost demand. And dried grapes have a small marketing program as well available. But so that's just sort of at a high level in terms of how Hort Innovation sort of functions, if you like, and how we, in the case case of dry grapes, how we sort of piece some of these things, things together. Just a quick one as well. So we've got the 5-year strategic investment plan. You can check all this out online. I'd encourage you to have a look. We go to the annual investment plan, so that then breaks down for one given year within the 5-year plan. What's actually happening at the moment? What's any new investment coming on board? What's ongoing? And this is an extract from that exact document, so you can see all of the different investments that we've got, on the books from the R&D side at least, at any one point in time, what we're spending, when that money is going to be going out the door. And then that's just a bit of a breakdown in terms of, where the money is being spent. And I can see straight away that, it's just over 70% of the funding is being spent in the extension and capability outcome area, primarily through I think it's the comms program you guys we invested in to help communicate and extend that information out. So that's just a little bit of a breakdown of sort of how things sort of function at a high level in the connection to dried grapes. But I'm here today to talk about sustainability. So I'll get into what we actually did to get this framework up and running, a bit of the background and how it's come together. So, as all businesses do these days, we all have strategies. We all like to strategize and think about what's important and where we want to go to and what we can deliver and how we can add value. And for Hort Innovation, we came up with, basically in our current strategic period, 2019 to 2023, we came up with, pretty simple, there's three strategic pillars that we came up with. And the one I want you to focus on, we came up also with this this vision. We exist to drive a prosperous and healthy Australia by providing the best knowledge and solutions to create a world-class horticulture sector. So a lot of nice fluffy words in there, but where I want you to focus in on is this second pillar. So basically, we sort of sought out to understand how can we deliver the highest value R&D, the highest value marketing, the highest value trade investments, and really looking to ensure that investment addresses all of horticulture opportunities and challenges. Because it's very common that what challenges are being faced in dried grapes may be faced in table grapes, in dried tree fruit, other industries as well. So looking to understand where those opportunities are. Now, digging a little bit deeper, we came across this initiative around trying to focus on the future of horticulture and prepare for the future opportunities and challenges that come from it. And basically where that came to was we came up with this idea of basically building the sustainability framework. And I've just put up some extra sort of comments and feedback that we got through the consultation period with growers when we were developing this strategy. At the time, we didn't have a language or a method or a rhythm or a rhyme to talk about or to sort of define sustainability for horticulture, because it meant so many things for so many different people. So in terms of looking for those future opportunities, in terms of future-proofing the sector, sustainability and developing a framework came out as a really clear theme in that process. So off we set to develop effectively this document, but obviously it just doesn't happen. There's a lot of things that come together to actually get it into place. A natural process for the framework started back in October 2019, so it was about just under a 2-year process to get this document together. All the usual things you'd expect to see in a document that's worth the paper it's written on. We did a materiality review. We spoke to over 300 different stakeholders, whether those are consumers, retailers, suppliers, growers, everyone in the mix, to understand what sustainability means to them and how they anticipate the future for the horticulture sector. We then drafted all this material down, developed a discussion paper, ultimately drafted the material, got the industry commitment. We had a number of forums along the way, and we ultimately launched this thing in June last year. So that's just in terms of where we got to, but I think that's all well and good, but let's actually get in and understand what this framework sort of spells out. What are the key areas that are of interest and relevance, and the actual structure of the framework. So pretty much and a big challenge here was the diversity. There's so many different sort of factors that we could think of in terms of what sustainability actually is. So we captured this through four pillars. So there were 4 key pillars, and I'll take you through each of these in a little bit more detail as we move through. But this is just the overall structure of how we actually sort of facilitate this document. Those pillars basically then spell out into 17 different topics, and each of those topics has a goal connected to it. So I'll show you some examples of those in the moment. We're talking about things like water use, things around the people and the environment, the community, waste. These are all examples of things that we came up with. And then the most probably important part of this whole thing is the indicator. So basically this is, from the goal, we have come up with indicators. So how can we actually measure our progress, or measure what we've actually committed to deliver? And obviously looking at what are some data sources, and in the case where we may not necessarily have data available right now, are there any case studies or any stories that we can start to tell around what growers or industry are doing against these goals and topics? And we've also connected it back to the UN Sustainability Development Goals as well. So we've got that sort of connection back up to more of like a global sort of reporting framework. So yeah, so taking this into a little bit more detail, so starting with pillars. So I mentioned there's 4 pillars, and I'll just give you a headline overview. So the first one is nourish and nurture. So this is all around recognising the role that horticulture plays in providing good nutrition for communities. The food that we produce is safe, it's traceable, it's quality. So that's the first. It's almost the utility value of horticulture. It's almost that value proposition, and not necessarily every ag sector can offer this from that sustainability perspective. So that's something we want to commit to, and we want to keep that at the forefront of how we operate. The second area is something that may not necessarily be at the forefront of what you think of when you think about sustainability, but it all comes down to the people and the enterprise. Because without a robust, base of talent, of people in the industry, of leadership and capacity, then there's no way that industry will remain sustainable into the future. So we've recognised that, and we're looking at a whole bunch of measures on leadership, on governance, and also around the working practices as well, safe and ethical work for our labour force. Now, the third one, planet and resources, is something probably more traditionally aligned with what you think of when you think about sustainability. So these are all. Sorry. No. Yep. All right. Yeah. So all about planet and resources. So all of the environmental inputs. So your water, your land, biodiversity, energy inputs. So this is the stuff you think about traditionally when you probably think about what it means to be sustainable. So we've already captured that, and we just thought this was so important we couldn't absorb it anywhere else, and it's about reducing our waste on farm and through the supply chain. So food waste, packaging and farm waste as well, we've recognised that. So yeah, so very, very holistic, it's everything combined is really what we mean when we think of sustainability for horticulture. So I mentioned there's these 17 topics, so there's a lot there, but just at a high level, I mentioned before, nourishment for people, plants as well, because green life fall into this horticulture sector as well. So obviously the role that green life plays in supporting vibrant communities, and the fact that our food is safe, it's traceable, and it's of high quality. So people and enterprise, so productive and profitable growers, because if we're not making money, we're not going to be sustainable. So that's important. If we don't have a workforce to ensure that we're producing and can get our crop off the vine, then that's essential for sustainability. Having good leadership and governance in place, so we've got a future pipeline to build and grow the industry moving forward. Innovation was another one. Thriving communities, so how do we actually engage and interact with the communities we exist in? And finally, basically trade and economic value. So understanding what do we actually give to the community? What do we contribute to the community from that economic standpoint? So planet and resources, so water, obviously, and I'll take you through an example using water. I thought that might be something of interest to you guys today. Landscapes as well, so how are we managing our land? Are we keeping in touch with our practices from a soil health perspective, biodiversity, and pollination and other things like that? the climate. So are we adjusting our practices to recognise a changing climate? How are we responding? And what are we doing to future-proof our production systems amidst a changing climate? Energy and our energy sources and our energy uses, and also biosecurity as well, so keeping our environment biosecure. And finally, as I mentioned, less waste, so looking at food waste, so trying to drive the quality of production, so we're maximising that top grade stuff. And if it's not, what are those alternative channels for utilising that food that might not necessarily make it to the shelf? Packaging as well, and also trying to minimise farm waste. So that's effectively the 17 topics that spill out from those 4 pillars across those areas there. Now, this is then where it gets a little bit more involved with respect to big indicators, because basically what we've done is for every one of these topics and goals, we've come up with some indicators to actually establish what do we want to measure against these. Now, I'm not going to go through every single one of those, but I thought just to illustrate the point, I'll take you through one example of how we translate from topic through to an indicator, and then connecting that through to the data sources as the basis of the framework. So, in the case of water, you can see, and I'll just start at the top here, this goal relates to basically the efficiency of water use. So whether that's through irrigation, water use efficiency, or the productivity measured in yield per megalitre or value per megalitre. So what we actually have done is, for this particular goal, we've got those indicators as matched there. We've then sought to identify what are some case studies from either industry or growers that we could draw on to illustrate how horticulture is actually achieving or performing or actually delivering something favourable against this particular topic. And in addition to that, what are some data sources that we could draw on? And in this case, we do have some existing data that the ABS collect that can be used to illustrate our performance against this particular goal. So that's really the mechanism of the framework, from pillar through to topic, and then moving that through to an indicator and data source. So we've, as mentioned, populated this for every one of those 17 topics. So that's all well and good, but I want to just also reflect on how we could actually use the framework in the context of dried grapes or other, at a business level potentially as well, or more broadly within the horticulture sector. So a few key things that the framework facilitates. It allows you to speak a common language. So when we're speaking about sustainability, the framework's a really useful resource if it's something that, at an industry level, at a business level, if you want to be speaking to consumers or speaking to the market, this framework provides that basis for you to do that, and as a result engage people and tell your sustainability story. It provides an opportunity for you to align your own industry practices with the topics and the goals that we've established in the framework. And it's not to say that everything within the framework is relevant, but there are, I'm sure, some aspects of that which you would potentially like to draw on and translate that back out to your markets and your suppliers and all the rest of it. And it's just as another example, I was speaking before about the strategic investment plan, like the 5-year plan that Hort Innovation works to, and we're working to understand how we can actually utilise the content from that sustainability framework and actually tap that into the relevant strategies that we've got within the strategic investment plan. So an example strategy within dried grapes was all about providing communication and extension services to industry to ultimately build grower awareness, knowledge, skills and adoption for the best practices. Now that's actually connected to one of those sustainability goals about building our people in our enterprise. So we can actually look for ways from an investment perspective how all of our different investments can actually support delivery against the framework. And just some examples of what is already going on. We've seen the almond industry in particular be a pretty strong adopter of some of the content from the framework, and they've now got a sustainable almonds program up and running that's connected back into that framework. And we've also got some other programs like Hort 360, which is like an on-farm certification sort of process to encourage best practice from an environmental perspective. That's been going on for a number of years, but the advantage of the framework is it allows us to sort of tap into all these existing initiatives and pull them together and report on them in a meaningful way. Yeah, so then just a few other points, prioritise investment, and I'll get to this in my next slide, but it really allows us to develop a foundation for reporting moving forward, which is really the next step. But what it isn't, it's not another layer of compliance. This is completely voluntary. It's almost choose your own adventure where you want to go with this stuff. But when coming down to industry or growers with extra stuff that they need to get done, this is purely looking to add value and enhance the value proposition for horticulture moving forward. And yeah, maybe that's some sort of sustainability product there. Now, next step, so where we want to get to, sustainability reporting. So the framework is almost the platform to allow us to start to report in a meaningful way around the sustainability credentials for horticulture. And this is just an example of something that we could take for water in terms of actually populating those indicators and filling out that data. But basically what the framework will allow us to do is, through a report, we can develop a bit of a baseline. So we're going through this right now, so we're looking across all those different topics and goals that we came up with in the framework and basically populating data sources that will allow us to understand how we're doing against each of those areas. And that's really important to establish a baseline, because if you don't have a baseline, you don't know where to go. And also looking at gathering the data as part of that process and looking at case studies, as I mentioned before. So we're in the process of compiling all these sorts of things. We've kicked it off with the Sustainability Summit, and we've got some working groups looking to validate, and we're expecting to release in December of this year. So we're actively sourcing things, and I'm sure there's potential case studies or other data sources in the room that we could tap into to help bring life to that document. But ultimately, where it all comes together is, and we've seen this in other ag industries, in dairy, in meat, in cotton, is getting to this stage where we're going to be starting to look at setting industry targets. So by establishing a baseline, we know where we're sitting at the moment, and then we can effectively leverage that to sort of set some targets, get commitment from industry to then do the necessary steps to then actually reach and achieve those targets. So that's the future. That's where this document, this framework, ultimately paves the path to get to that point at the end of the day. And I think that's it. So.